17 years. Nearly half my life devoted to one place, a company whose every cobblestone, every cable, every line of code I knew. And one day, in a single minute, they told me everything was over. No warning, no explanation, just one sentence. Your position has been eliminated. But there was something they didn't know. I, who had silently watched everything for years, was more than just an employee. I was the system itself. And when the time for revenge came, I knew better than anyone how that system would collapse. 6 months had passed. In my new corner office, watching the bustling silhouette of Columbus through the glass, I thought about how much my life had changed. I was now Meridian's Director of Information Security, reporting directly to the board. The quiet systems guy who had been ignored for years had become the company's most important guardian. Brian Wilcox, now going by Mark Miller, had received a reduced prison sentence in exchange for returning part of the money he'd embezzled. Daniel, known as Alex, continued to fight the charges, but the evidence was stacked against him. Jason Phillips, aka Tyler, had been extradited from Brazil and legal proceedings were underway. The proof I'd uncovered was so solid that it had saved the company from a major financial crisis. My old team now reported to me, and I'd promoted my own mentor, Kevin, to run daily operations. Kevin had potential. He only needed someone to believe in him. There was a knock at the door. My wife, Sarah, stood there smiling. "Ready for lunch?" she asked. I nodded as I grabbed my coat. In the elevator, Sarah linked her hand with mine. "Are you happy?" she asked. I forced a small smile, thinking about the question. My actions had once been driven by the anger of revenge, but now that feeling had given way to a calm sense of satisfaction. It was no longer revenge so much as the completion of a mission. "I'm good," I said. When the elevator doors opened, we passed the IT department. Conversation in the room stopped for a brief moment, then resumed. That silence wasn't from fear. It was respect. These people knew I wouldn't destroy the company. I would save it. Outside, the autumn sun warmed our faces. We walked toward a nearby restaurant. My phone rang. It was a message from Robert. The board approved the security budget increase. Unanimous. My smile widened. Sarah noticed. "What happened?" she asked. "Nothing," I said, slipping the phone into my pocket. "I was just thinking about bridges. Some collapse under their own weight. Others become even stronger after being repaired." This time I knew I'd built the right bridge. Weeks later, while I was working on new projects in the office, the door knocked again. The visitor was my old boss, Alex's lawyer. "Mr. Williams," the lawyer said, "I'm speaking on behalf of my client. He wants this case to be resolved as soon as possible. If we can reach an out-of-court settlement, it would be better for everyone." I leaned back in my chair calmly. "There will be no settlement from my side. Everything that has come out is legal and documented." The lawyer swallowed nervously. "My client offers additional compensation for the wrongful termination and better references." I smiled. My references are no longer given by a lawyer. They're earned by my actions. I can only tell you this: justice will take its course. Seeing my resolve, the lawyer left the office. That evening at home, while Sarah and I were eating, a mysterious message arrived on my personal phone. "We never forget a traitor like you. You will pay for what you did." There was no sender number. I immediately routed the message into my security system. I traced it to a virtual network Tyler had used while in Brazil. I didn't tell Sarah. Protecting security was my responsibility. The next morning at the office, I gathered my security team. We've already strengthened our cybersecurity protocols, but now we need to increase personal security measures for people working from home as well. We'll implement the highest level of personal data protection and home security measures for everyone. This is an order. I gave everything to my lawyer. With the new evidence, the legal process accelerated. A week later, Mark Miller's deal was voided, and his sentence increased. Alex's denials collapsed, and he was convicted. I felt like the end of the story had arrived. Justice had been served. The only loose end was that threat message. I knew Tyler had returned and was seeking revenge. But Tyler had made the biggest mistake. I worked for security, not vengeance. One day, Tyler would realize the same vulnerability he once exploited in the system, and he would find it from behind the very security walls I'd built. My story had not ended. It was, in fact, just beginning. The legal aspects of the matter moved forward quickly and, at times, more ruthlessly than expected. The cold lights of the courtrooms weighed the simple term justice like a heavy instrument. Every piece of evidence, every email, every voice recording was placed on the scales, one by one. Our lawyers worked with the weary attention to detail that years produce. I, meanwhile, closed my office windows and sat among the blue lights of the security panels. Inside, Kevin was mapping the relationships between files and servers step by step. Each point, each connection told a story, sometimes embarrassingly bare, sometimes astonishingly calculated and cold-blooded. The truth was that justice did not arrive all at once. It came slowly, patiently, as a result of making everything visible. Some names within the company had protected one another for years, weaving a web of quiet agreements and small compromises. That web one day shook like a structure with a rotten branch. But the collapse did not start solely with my evidence. Crucially, I had revealed that evidence at the right time and in the right place. Those documents were tangible proofs that broke the other side's claims in the court's balance. Conversations, money transfers, traces of files that had been claimed deleted. As legal victories were won, the atmosphere around me changed. People in the office stood taller and looked at me with more confident appreciation. This was not only a professional vindication, but the affirmation of an identity. While climbing the stairs, the injustice done to me felt more and more like a distant memory. But that didn't mean the anger was gone. Anger had transformed into a careful calm, a metamorphosis from consuming fire to a controllable energy. My relationship with Sarah proved stronger than expected at the center of that storm. Her presence was not an outside force. Rather, she was a reminder of stability and humanity. Through all of it, Sarah became my most trusted confidant. She neither fed my plans nor punished them. She simply was there. Sometimes, in the middle of the night, I would wake and hold her hand while looking at the city lights, and amid all the chaos, there was a human warmth. That was not the cooling of revenge. It was the strengthening of reason and the pursuit of good that guided it. But the source of the threat had not disappeared. The shadow of that anonymous message remained over me. The networks and connections Tyler had built while in Brazil provided him with guidance and safety. I, however, had learned what security meant. I had built it, and I controlled it. That was the essential difference between us. He spoke the language of chaos and profit. I saw the logic of the system. Those two languages were bound to clash. While managing that tension, I decided to run physical preparations and legal preparations in parallel. Our home security system was layered more deeply than ever, without getting into technical specifics. The goal was to minimize traceability and deter any attack. At the same time, we increased awareness of insider threats company-wide. Trainings and drills were held, and everyone's personal security was redefined. Kevin was indispensable in this process. His technical skill and loyal character gave him power as an operational leader. The media attention was less than we expected. Perhaps in a world that rapidly consumes corporate scandals, our story remained more of an internal legal and corporate cleanup affair. That suited me. Public exposure could trigger dangerous elements. Instead, I quietly made the repairs, filled the cracks, and fortified the bridges. Conversations with Kevin showed me that he had changed not only in skill, but in character. Once, on the highest floor of our offices looking at the city, I said to him, "Sometimes doing the right thing is not the easiest path. But the truly lethal choice is doing nothing." Kevin did not take his eyes off me. He nodded silently. In his eyes, I saw a deeper resolve, not because I believed in him, but because he had chosen right on his own. As the legal process progressed, the opposing counsel began to operate with a mix of desperation and anger. Offers, threats, and small bribery attempts reappeared, but none opened a hole in our defenses. As transparency inside the company increased, the chance for dark deals hidden in corners diminished. This was a civil victory, the institutionalization of law and the reactivation of internal democratic mechanisms. On Tyler's side, there was an unsettling kind of shadow. His extradition from Brazil had slowed him, but his psychology remained combative. The most troubling thing about him was not only his thirst for revenge, but that in trying to erase parts of the past, he had left traces that incriminated him. His actions had become a sword that cut him. But that blade would come back to him at the right time. That is why tracking his movements was crucial, to stop him and to prevent innocent harm. One night, late at the office, the screens showed only logs and security alerts. Kevin sent a remote report. Suspicious connection attempts, geolocation, and timing point to infrastructure Tyler could technically access. Rather than panic, I realized a calm, calculated plan was needed. It was about taking targeted measures and closing off possible scenarios. Everything was like a domino game. Before one tile fell, the next had to be reinforced. When the court announced the verdicts, the atmosphere in the courtroom was tense, but held a sense of relief. Mark Miller's increased sentence and Alex's conviction, these were outcomes. What mattered to me was proving that justice was not only punishment, but also rebuilding institutions. After the rulings, the company began a new compliance and oversight program. The board did more than increase the security budget. It took meaningful steps to embed a security culture into the company's DNA. There were other tasks not visible to the public, preserving old records, storing them, and keeping them accessible if needed. This was not, as many assumed, a revenge vault. It was an archive of memory and accountability. People were curious about where those files were stored, but I never gave them that satisfaction. My archival strategy was designed to remove incriminating documents as instruments of blackmail, and instead put them at the service of the law. When legal requirements are met, those files become tools of truth, not instruments of extortion. With Kevin, I placed the archives into several secure tiers, some entrusted to reliable international legal institutions, some put into cold storage solutions, and some held in encrypted, distributed documentation systems. The key was balancing access control with transparency. Those who had access were identified, access logs were recorded, and any access attempt automatically notified the relevant legal authorities. That greatly reduced the possibility of malicious use. Still, no system is 100% secure. Psychological readiness mattered just as much. Initially, Tyler's threats came as physical messages and digital traces. Over time, the theater of threats changed. The tone shifted from personal messages to a more sophisticated and psychological campaign. Rather than direct operational disruption, he tried to attack morale, to create fear and loss of confidence among employees. As the company leader, I had to respond both institutionally and humanely, protect employees while showing them the company stood with them, not against them. One report Kevin brought me showed Tyler had organized a far more structured network. He aimed to infiltrate the infrastructure of some external suppliers and exert pressure indirectly. Those moves were stopped within legal and policy frameworks, yet they showed Tyler had evolved from a disgruntled ex-employee into a node of resistance. That made capturing him even more important. He needed to have less power, not more. To effectively limit him through legal channels, we launched international collaborations. We coordinated with law enforcement and digital forensics teams and shared information with relevant Brazilian authorities. The process was long and procedural, but advanced in definite steps. The details were complex. A gearbox of diplomats, lawyers, and technical teams. Human relationships were critical. Talking to the right people, building trust, and ensuring smooth information flows. One evening at work, I found a short note Sarah had sent me. "I forgot the house key. I'm waiting at the door. I'll be waiting for you." That simple sentence reminded me of the small but unshakable centers of life. No matter how big the matters on the scales of justice, people sometimes need a small touch. And Sarah was always that. Her presence reminded me of my humanity. Not only revenge, but the capacity to forgive and to rebuild. As the moment to confront Tyler approached, our plan was scrupulously reviewed for both strategic and ethical considerations. Our goal was not to silence him, but to end his actions proportionally and legally. This went beyond revenge. It was about preserving the rule of law. Preventing the societal impacts of one person's crimes mattered more than mere personal punishment. As institutions regain trust, such cycles of crime are harder to repeat. The final confrontation took place near midnight and brought unexpected emotional burdens. When Tyler was taken into custody, there was a melancholic air I'd expected. He was not only an enemy, but also a product once nurtured by the system and later expelled. There was no remorse in his eyes, only the reflection of loss and helplessness. Much of what he said to me was defensive and cutting. However, the thing that struck me most was that he was afraid. Afraid for his future, for loneliness, for the consequences. That reminded me of the complexity of human nature. No one is purely hero or monster. When Tyler stood before the judge, he carried himself with a composed demeanor. His lawyers employed every legal avenue. I testified at the hearing. I felt a relief because I could defend the correctness, transparency, and purpose of my actions. When the legal process is concluded, Tyler faced the consequences in a court of law. In the public eye, a message had been delivered. Law applies to everyone, regardless of rank. After the verdicts became final, it was time to establish a new normal inside the company. Not only technical systems, but human relationships and corporate culture were renewed. The board strengthened ethics rules and oversight mechanisms and launched programs to regain employees' trust. This was a repair process, as much about fixing broken things as making them stronger than before. There were personal costs to the shifts in my career. Some friendships and routines changed. Some people stayed, others drifted away. That was natural. Change sorts people. In the end, one of the most precious gains was mentoring someone like Kevin. His leadership abilities emerged. I had mentored him, and he internalized those lessons and contributed to the organization's transformation. An interesting turn came to daily life. My morning commute to the office became more than a duty. It carried purpose. Protecting a culture of security, training young engineers, setting clear boundaries against ethical violations. These became tasks that reminded me what to do after the battle. Leadership is revealed not in victory moments alone, but in sustaining the order that follows victory. As time passed and seasons changed, the city quieted. The autumn leaves that once reminded me of endings became signs of new beginnings. Bridges inside the company were rebuilt, sometimes narrow, sometimes broad, but all stronger than before. In this new phase, I became not just a guardian, but also a teacher. I shared what I had learned with teams and ensured lessons from past mistakes were heeded. Yet, knowing the story was not completely finished gave me both caution and strength. While justice had been served, the fragility of systems always remained. So there was a constant state of vigilance. Security is not a destination, but a constantly renewed journey. I now charted that path, not just for the institution, but for ethics and responsibility. In closing, I can say, these events taught me that the satisfaction of revenge is short-lived. The true long-term victory is building something correctly and turning it into a legacy others can use. Administering justice is not only punishing the guilty, it is making institutions, individuals, and society more trustworthy. My story did not end here. It began a broader narrative of trust, accountability, and reconstruction. And at the end of the video, the questions I left viewers with still stand. How did I store those files? Which bridges did I build? The temptation to know is strong, but the main thing you need to understand is this: no hidden truth stays hidden forever. Truth waits to appear in the right conditions. I did not just wait. I prepared the conditions. From here, there is hope. When systems grow stronger together with people, the shadows of the past become less frightening. And if one day I step onto one of those bridges, it will be enough for me to know that I left behind a solid structure,